Checking, 1, 2, 3. Good afternoon. Can everybody hear me? Good afternoon. Good afternoon. Can everybody hear me? Good. Excellent. Just need to be closer to the mic so that I don't have to project my voice. I'll let the mic do the work for me. Just let everybody settle down first before I start. Okay, so welcome everybody. Good morning. So this week we've got this is the start of your trimester C, and this is the start of your dissertation. So welcome to this particular module. What we'll do is for this first session, I'm going to introduce to you the what is involved in the dissertation process, and also what's the expectations of what's required of you in dissertation. This is for most of you, this will be the very last module that you'll be taking before you actually graduate. So and it forms quite a large amount of credit. So it is really important that you engage with this particular module and work with your supervisors. Previously, I've sent to you a selection form about all the projects that is currently on offer. And thank you very much for sending in your choices. What I've done is I have already allocated you last week to the different projects. I've informed the supervisors who the students are. However, I've not actually informed you which group you're in. So what will happen is I will be sending out within this week emails to your supervisor and to all your group members so that you know exactly who is within your group and also who are your supervisors. That will also allow you, the email will also allow you to know the email addresses of the group members, just in case you don't know each other. But I'm sure most of you would know each other. I mean, I know that you can't know everybody, but at least within the group that you've been allocated to, it's very likely you'll be working as a group. Therefore, it's quite nice to be able to communicate with each other and help each other out. Okay? And also, obviously, you then be able to communicate with the supervisors as well. So once you receive the email about your group allocation and you know who your supervisors are, what you need to do is to, as a group, maybe get someone to represent the group so that the supervisor doesn't get bombarded by several emails, because each supervisor have at least about between 3 to 5. Some supervisors have got 2 projects, so they've got 10 students. So can you imagine how many emails they'll be getting if there's a request or meeting? So get someone to represent your group, email the email the supervisor so that to arrange your very first meeting so that you can come together, have a chat about the topics, what's expected of what is expected of you. Different supervisors will have different styles of supervision, so it really depends on who you get allocated to. And it's a good thing that there is a variation in terms of the styles, because the projects and the topics may require a different style of supervision in order to facilitate you in getting on with your dissertation. Okay, so I'm going to start now in terms of the introducing you to the module itself. Welcome to this module, and my name is Chee-Wee. I'm the module lead for this particular module. If there is any issues regarding the dissertation itself, if it's to do with the module, I'm the person to contact so that I can help to resolve the issues for you. If, however, it's a project-related issue, something that is to do with the project that you are, then your supervisor will be the first port of call. Okay, so I mean, if you ask me about your project, I can probably help you a little bit, but the person that's relevant that you should be asking is your dissertation supervisor. So that's the first protocol that you should be doing. So today, these are some of the contents that I'll be going through. For some of you, you may be doing your research in the same time as your dissertations. So I'm not in charge of the other modules. So the person who would know how you should be progressing will be your program leader. So that will be Artaban. If Artaban is your program leader. For some of you, Michelle may be your program leader. Also, even some of you, Kate may be your program leader. So it really depends on which program you're from, because there are more than one program represented here. So your program leader will be the person who will be familiar with how your progression is and what research, or perhaps at some point, if you don't meet a certain sort of prerequisite for taking the dissertation on, you may not actually progress on to the dissertation, even though we've allocated you and you are now sitting here. The reason why we've done this is so that we can actually progress the students. We currently don't know what the outcomes will be. So rather than pull them back and wait for the outcome, which means that the students will lose time, the tutors rather you come and attend the class anyway, because you're going to be engaging with the dissertation at some point. So hearing the information slightly earlier would disadvantage you anyway. In fact, if you listen to this again, if you are taking it at a slightly later date, then you'll be like, oh, I heard that, but now I'm just refreshing my memory, and therefore you're much more familiar with the process. So if you're not engaging with the dissertation module this semester, don't worry about it. Just sit here and enjoy this week anyway, because we planned some classes for you from LDC about how to write a dissertation. In fact, this afternoon there is something that we're planned for you as well. If you look at the timetable that's on your GCU Learn site, today there is a session for you as well, right here. Then also there is library will also have a lab session for you, and you'll be divided into 2 large groups. So your grouping would be on your GCU Learn, the first page. If you scroll down, you see that there is a little embedded sort of table. Just scroll through and see which group you have been allocated to. If you haven't been allocated to any group, then just go to group 2. Okay, and because group 2 has got less people that think. I mean, they're equal, but I don't expect all the people within group 2 to be there. So just assume that you're in group 2 if you haven't been allocated to any. Okay, but if you allocated group 1, please kindly don't go to group 2, because the rooms are just at capacity. Which means that what we've done is we've booked rooms for between about 45 to 60 people. If people started streaming from either group 2 going to group 1 or group 1 going to group 2, what will happen is that you go to the lab and you realize that you've got nowhere to sit. So which means that you have to sit on each other's laps or on each other's shoulders while you're trying to figure out how to use the computers. I mean, I'm quite happy for you to do that, but I don't think you like it very much. So so stick to your groups. The reason why I allocate you to groups is because there's quite a lot of you, and the rooms have got only that number of spaces. Okay. So just a very quick overview. The entire module is about 60 credits. Currently, you would have, whether you've done research or not, you will have completed about 120 credits. So that means that you have achieved roughly at about the postgraduate diploma level. In order to go on to the next level, which is the master's degree, you need to have 60 more credits, which is why you're doing dissertations, in order to be able to accumulate that 60 degrees to push you up from a postgraduate diploma to a master's level. So this is a combination. This is your capstone project, so it's really important that you engage with it. And there'll be some new skills that you will be learning. Okay, so a lot of you may not have done a project or before, so this may be something new to you. But the most important thing is to bring an attitude of learning and curiosity, as well as being not afraid to ask questions and ask for help and go away and find out information to learn. That is the attitude that we want you to have in order for you to be able to succeed in your dissertation. Within the dissertation itself, the skills that you gain whilst you do the project, do the literature searches and everything else, these knowledge, even though it doesn't look as if it's got a use, but it's actually really important when you are a slightly more advanced professional. These advanced skills of thinking, critiquing, as well as selection of literature, as well as coming to conclusions about applications and implications of research and findings from the evidence will ultimately help you to make better decisions as clinicians, because then your clinical practice and your professional practice will be evidence-based rather than just simply based on anecdotes or just based on your experience, which is important, but then you want to have a much wider, much more profound and much more deeper, a much more varied view of your own practice. Okay, and that means that it provides you, in terms of skill sets and knowledge, and as well as your competencies, with a much wider range, and it empowers you and sort of pads up your CV and your personal development as a physiotherapist or as an allied health professional. So this particular project will require you to be engaged in depth with either a literature review, or rather a critical, a structured literature review, or a data collection project, or a secondary analysis, depending on the project that you have been allocated to. Okay, so this is a piece of independent project that is done by you. You may work as a group, you may collaborate in the initial stages, but ultimately the final write-up will be you that will be finishing the write-up on your own with the help of your supervisors. Okay. There are two types of projects. One is the data collection project, and the other one is a structured literature review. Most of you here, based on the list of projects that I've given you on the selection, most of it is a structured literature review. There are some projects which are, I think, data collection or secondary analysis. So if you've been allocated to that, just be aware that you may need to get your hands dirty and do some work regards to that. Because of the short period of time for you to engage in this work, you only got one trimester, which is effectively between 12 to 14 weeks of engaging, collecting the data, and also write up the final product and present. So it's unlikely that you'll be asked to do things like apply for research ethics. So if you get the data collection project, it's very likely that the research ethics would already have been collected, would have been approved. So you don't really need to worry about that. However, if there is an issue with the project itself, the best person to speak to will be your supervisor, so that you don't waste time. Okay. So let's talk a little bit about the data collection project first. So if it's a data collection or secondary data analysis, essentially you will be doing primary data collection, or someone has already collected the data for you. So now it's in the database, and your job is to go in, dive in into the database, and look at the data, and then analyze the data for according to a particular research question you have set up in order to query the database, the data within the database itself. It is now, there might be some lab projects, I'm not sure, so you might have to speak to your supervisors if you've been allocated, or what is it that you're required to do. You are the final product. There are two, after this I'll talk a little bit more, there are two assessment products that you need to produce. The very first one is to write a paper that's 6,000 words. So for the data collection project or secondary analysis, you will be writing a 6,000 word paper in the style of a research article. Exactly the same for the structured literature review, except that for a structured literature review, you'll be writing a style much more of a review style research paper. And for the data collection project, you'll be writing the style of a empirical study structure. For the structured literature review, it will, as the name suggests, it will be a review of the literature based on the particular question and the topic area that you have been allocated to of your interest. You have to make sure that one of the key things is that a lot of the questions that you ask will most likely have a previous review done before. So the next question you need to ask yourself, if that is the case, is what hasn't been done before, or what gap is there that you need to answer? Or perhaps you're asking the exact same question, but that particular review previously has been done maybe about 5-10 years ago, and no new review have actually been done in very recent times. So in between, there will be probably about a 5 to 10 year gap, or perhaps even smaller, when new studies may have been churned out over that period of time. And your review would be to say, this is there was a previous review, and right now there are more studies, and you would like to look at what the current situation in terms of the literature is to see whether there's any changes. So that's one of the rationale for conducting a very similar review. Okay. So a lot of students ask me, if you're going to be doing a structured literature review, how many research papers should I be including in my review in order for it to be sufficient? There is no definite answer for that. It really depends on what research question you're asking. But in order for a structured literature review to be of some substance where you can write about, you should at least have about roughly between about 5. Okay, and students, based on past experience, students have between about 5 to 15 articles. If you have got more than that, it's absolutely fine, except that just remember that anything more than 15, it makes your analysis much more tedious because there's a lot more articles to work with. Then you go, Chee-Wee, you tell me between about 5 to 15, how do I control the number of articles? Because I have absolutely no control. I didn't publish the articles, and therefore, how would I know? So there is a search strategy that you can implement where you can actually tailor the eligibility criteria, which is your inclusion exclusion criteria, what types of studies you want, alter the criteria in order to be able to see what the final number is. So if let's say, for example, you've chosen several databases, you've chosen some search terms, and what you come up with is you've got about 50 articles, which means that your search criteria is too broad. You need to narrow it down. Okay. Then after tweaking the inclusion and exclusion criteria, what you found is that by applying that to the databases, now you have got about 7 articles. Then you know that that's the correct, roughly the appropriate sort of approach. If you have designed a search strategy and with all the search terms and eligibility criteria, you find that you have absolutely nothing, no articles. Firstly, you ask yourself, has any research been done before on that particular research question or that particular topic? If there isn't, then you may want to ask yourself, should I change my research question? Okay, because if there are no previous studies done before, then there is no particular need for a literature review. What you want to do really is to conduct an empirical study to collect data rather than evaluate past papers. However, there is another scenario where it may be that your search criteria is too strict and therefore you have excluded too many things. Then what you need to do is look at your eligibility criteria and think, okay, which ones can I loosen up and relax slightly? So if you think that you've done that, you loosen up the criteria a little bit, and then you suddenly get maybe about 6 articles, then you know that, yeah, that's the correct one. So there are some studies done in that area. It's just that you have been too strict in your inclusion-exclusion criteria. Okay, so these are just some of the tricks that we can use. There are certain things that you need to include if you're doing a structured literature review. There are certain things you need to include. And these are quite standard. If you were to pick up any systematic review from that's been published, then what you see is that you get some of these things, like, for example, a prisma diagram, quality appraisal tool, and also data extraction table, tables of summarizing the characteristics of the studies, tables summarizing the findings, so on and so forth. So these are quite standard, and these are expected to be in your paper itself. So when you're writing a paper, it's actually worth thinking about these to help you think about what is necessary to be included. We have given you some exemplars, so examples of what paper should look like from past students. So if you go onto the GCU Learn, go onto the left-hand side, there is this panel. There should be somewhere around there. I don't know under which particular subtitle. There's a link called exemplars. If you click on that, then you will get some examples of different types of papers for different types of projects. Don't use that as a guide, just to give you an idea. Okay, so don't sort of paraphrase what they've done, but just so that you know what are the key elements of what should be included in order for a paper of that sort. Again, the final product is a 6,000 word research paper. Okay. Then there is a second assessment product, which is your oral presentation. This will take up about 30% of your marks. The paper itself comprises 70% of the total marks. So 30% is not a lot, but it's not too little either. So which means that we're encouraging students to put some effort into their presentation. If I were to just say that your presentation is worth only 5%, then nobody will put any effort into it. So what we've done is we actually we put it at 30%. And it's quite important in terms of presentation, because presentation skills is quite a unique set of skills that current healthcare professionals are required more and more to utilize in order to get what you're trying to say across in a simplified, in a sort of summarized manner. Because you've been so involved in doing either the data collection or the structured review, that your head is now full of all the different things about the findings. A lot of times when you do that, when you start to speak to someone about what you've done, a lot of times you are speaking, because you've been so immersed in the topic itself, when you try to speak to someone, people will just go, what are you talking about? I don't understand. Because you're using a lot of jargon, you are assuming that the other person understands what you understand as well. So by having the things like a presentation, where you're only given a very, very short period of time to convey the key findings of what you've done, then it helps you to focus your mind on trying to think, okay, that person, the audience doesn't know what I've done, but now I'm supposed to be presenting in a way that they can then, within that short period of time, is able to understand what I've done and what the findings are for my particular project. So, which is why we have given you, we set a timing. So it's 10 minutes where you can present with slides and everything. And then after which, we're also giving you an additional 5 minutes to open up to questions to the audience and the examiners, where they can ask you any questions about your project and about your presentation. Okay, so some of the key mistakes and errors that students have made is that they try to cram everything into that 10 minutes and they don't finish, or either that you just speak very, very fast and then I'm like, I can't catch a word you're saying, right? So avoid these simple mistakes. So what you need to do is then think, what is the key elements of each section of I should be putting in my presentation, so that everybody understands what I've done in a format that is understandable, but yet everybody knows exactly what the findings are as well, in a way that that everybody can understand, even if they've not done your topic. Okay, so and most of the time, for if you are a full-time student, it's very likely that your presentations will be face-to-face. So I'll be allocating you to about groups of between 5 to 6 students, and you'll be in a room with 2 examiners. And for a period of about between 1.5 to 2 hours, you'll be presenting to each other. And then the examiners will be there to make sure that everything is running smoothly. Okay, so that's usually how it's done. And once you're done, then you can go. So if you have been you will usually be allocated to that small group. You're supposed to attend the entire group presentation. And the reason why we do that is because you don't just present, but you're also there to listen to someone else's presentation, so that sometimes it's easier if someone has a small audience there, so you can speak to someone. If you're just speaking to an empty room, it feels very weird. If all of you are not here, I'm just speaking to the room, I'm just like, why am I doing this? It's just weird. Okay, I'm just talking to myself. But and I've done that a lot of times, but not for a presentation. So which is why having a small little group is quite nice. I don't expect you to be there for the whole day, which is why I've put you in a small group, so that you don't have to be there for the whole day. You just be there for the 1.5 to 2 hours, and then you can go. And that's the end. Yay. Okay. If you are a part-timer, very likely, because part-timers will be most likely be holding a job as well. I'm not saying that full-timers don't have a job. I'm saying that the part-timers tend to be working full-time whilst doing the dissertation itself. So they'll be working from 9 to 5 from Mondays to Fridays. And for these people, it tends to be that we'll do the thing online. And also, they're much more likely to be at different parts of the UK. So I've got people sort of coming in from different parts of the UK. So it's much easier if I put it online. So they don't have to plan to come to Glasgow just to present for the 2 hours. Okay. So the skill set is really important. It gives you some skill sets, lets you practice and prepare for skills like presenting at conferences and things like that, or even at meetings where you're asked to present to your fellow colleagues. And by having a practice in this assessment, it will sort of help to hone some of your skills. The presentations itself will be videoed, which means that there will be a video. Just like right now, I've got a video camera videoing myself, so that you have a copy of this particular lecture. Okay, and I'll put it up onto GCU Learn so that you can access it, just in case you think my voice sounds so beautiful that you want to listen again and again, or perhaps my voice is so boring that you want to play it whilst you are trying to go to bed. That's absolutely fine. I don't really care how you use the recording, but it's there if you need it. Okay, it's there if you need it. Obviously, it's an additional thing that I'm doing. Lecturers tend not to do that, but I do this just in case. And if you for any reason there are information that isn't covered in the in this lecture itself, and that then you can always come back to me and ask me the question. So I'm always here to answer any questions that you have. Okay. The videos of your presentations are not so that we can actually take them and then we put it in the department and we start laughing at it. No, it's actually for quality assurance purposes. We're not cruel. To be honest, if I had a choice of not videoing, recording your presentations, I would, because it's a lot more work. The reason why we do that is because of quality assurance purposes. Just in case we need a third person to come in and have a look, at least we got a video, then that person can come in and make sure that the examiners have got it correct, or at least to confirm or maybe modify or moderate what the examiners have done. But also it allows us to send it off to the external examiners, which are academics from other institutions, which come and ensure that the quality of our course is appropriate, so that they can actually have a look as well to see what's going on. Okay, so it's only used for that purpose. If we are going to use those videos beyond those purpose, we will contact you directly to ask you for permission, whatever the purpose that we are using it for, and then you're free to say no. Okay, but if we don't ask you, then that's the only purpose we'll be videoing your presentations for. I'm just going to stop here for a little while. And does anybody have any questions for me before I continue? No? So far so good? Yeah? Great. Let's move on to the next bit, which is your assessment dates. So the assessment dates are as follows. I missed out the number for the paper. It's actually 12th of August. It's on your GCU Learn as well. Okay. So if you don't know what the submission dates are, don't worry. I've got so many dates I sometimes can't remember. So it's on your GCU Learn. On your GCU Learn, there also will be a module handbook on the entry page. You scroll all the way towards the bottom, there will be a module handbook for trimester C. You download it, your submission dates are there as well. Okay, so 12th of August is where you submit your 6,000 word research paper. Your presentations will be held on the 20th to the 21st of August. And the reason there's a range of dates is because there's so many of you. We can't examine you all in one day. So I have to spread you out about 2 or 3 days. In fact, you are not the only dissertation students we are examining. We've got more dissertation students, so I've got another batch of students on other days as well. So, but that's to be confirmed. So far, I placed it on the 20th and 21st. In order to prepare, you're supposed to hand in, submit your presentation slides on the 19th of August. Okay, by the end of the day. By the end of the day, I mean 2359 hours. So, to be honest, if you actually submit at 0001, 20th of August, I don't really care. Because I'm not awake there to monitor you. Okay? I'm usually asleep by 12 midnight. So if you hand it in at 1 a.m., that's fine. The reason why we ask you to submit the presentation slides for 2 reasons. One, it means that you've got a footprint on the Turnitin so that we can actually give you feedback once we marked it. Secondly, we've got a copy of it as a backup, just in case whatever happens on the day itself, your slides are not working, then we can go to the Turnitin and download it and then use it as a backup. So that's the reason why we ask you to submit that. Okay, good. And your paper is 6,000 words. A lot of students keep asking me this and again. I'm sure if I'm going to tell you what the 6,000 words include right now, you will still ask me closer, let's say the last week or several weeks before submission date, but I'm going to say it anyway. 6,000 words do not include the tables, the figures, or the references, okay? They don't include these. The appendices are not included in 6,000 word as well. So the 6,000 is just the content of whatever you have there. You can write between, it's actually a range, you can write between about 4,000 to 6,000 words. Okay, so 6,000 is the maximum. Is that a 10% rule? No, 6,000 is the max. But do I go away and count, and whether you have, if you, let's say, for example, you got 6,010 words, do I go away and go, oh, that's terrible, you got 10 extra words? I don't care. So, there's a slight flexibility there. But if I read reams and reams of content and realize that you got 8,000 words, then I go, wait a minute, that's not right. Okay, so 6,000 is the maximum as a general rule. I would go in and count the 6,000 words, but you shouldn't be, taking advantage of that because I'm not checking. So, but 6,000 words is enough for you to be able to put in the content in order to show the your skill sets and show some quality in your work. Okay, so that's the reason why we put it between 4,000 and 6,000 words. Usually in a research paper, it's about 2,500 words, and you're supposed to cram everything into a 2,500 word paper. The fact that we've been you 2 or 3 times that, it's actually a luxury. The reason why we're giving you that is because we understand that you are novices in writing research papers, and therefore you do not know how to be slightly more succinct or much more concise in your language in order to be able to do that. But it's fine. So 4,000, 6,000 words is sufficient. Okay. Your abstract is included in the 4,000, 6,000 words as well. Okay. Just in case you're wondering, yes, it's included. So don't ask me again, please. But if you do forget, double check. I think it's a module handbook, but I'm not quite sure. I don't think it's in there. But if you really forget, just ask me again, and I'll try my best to be patient and explain to you again. Okay. So by now you should be familiar with the passing threshold. We know that for the master's level, your pass mark is 50%. Okay, but the compensatable range, if a particular module has got two components, which means that you've got like this, you've got the paper itself as well as the presentation. Then in order for one component to compensate for the other to make up the marks, it needs to be above 45. So it's still a fail, but we can still compensate using the other. So let's say, for example, you've got the presentation is about 42, and your paper is about 60. So you can use your 60 to compensate based on a weightage to compensate, and you might still get a pass. Oh no, sorry. If it's 42, you can't compensate. If your presentation is 47, you can compensate. You see, one is below 45 and the other one's above 45. So that's how it works. Okay, and we will keep you right. Because the system will calculate that for you automatically. And just in case you don't know, then just ask and then I can explain to you whether it can be compensated or not. If it's below 45 or any other components, that means that you've got qualified fail. You are required to reset that particular component, just that particular component. You don't have to reset everything again, just that component. You got that? Excellent. Yeah, because we don't want to spend our time marking every other thing that you passed anyway. So we got to get you to do the things that you've filled in. Okay. Right. So let me see. I've never seen this slide before. Why? Oh, right. Okay. This is just to tell you how the assessments are marked. So the assessments are marked in a way, because this is a dissertation, based on the university assessment regulations. For a dissertation, it needs to be double marked. Okay, what it means is that usually in your other modules, you only have a first marker, and then you may or may not have someone coming in to moderate the marks. But for dissertations, every single student needs to have 2 markers. So you've got a first marker, who is your supervisor, and there is a second marker with someone that has been allocated to mark together with supervisors. They are supposed to mark independently and then come together to agree the marks. Okay, and on top of that, we will also have the moderation process where someone else comes in and double checks the quality and the marking consistency of a selection of students with different grade bandings. And then on top of that, the external examiner will also moderate some of the selected. So there are how many layers of checks for quality? One, there's two, there's 3 layers of quality checks. Okay, so if you pass, you know you passed. If you fail, unfortunately, you know you failed. Okay, so please don't come back to me and go, oh, sir, can you give me more marks? I'm like, I wish I could, but unfortunately, the 3 layers of checks have confirmed that that's a fail. Yeah. So which is why I would say it's quite rigorous. Okay. So it's not something that we take very lightly. It will be the same for the presentation, except that obviously for presentation, both examiners will be there, sitting there marking. But after they marked it, when the presentation is over, they will be in a room on their own. Between the two of them, they'll be discussing what an agreed mark for you. And that same level of scrutiny comes in using the video recording so that someone else can actually double check again. So as you can see, we take this very seriously. We will check and double check and triple check until the cows come home. Okay, so that we have to ensure that everything is right to make sure that you are that quality. I think that's it. If you are interested, and I would strongly encourage you, even though it's not something that you probably read it for fun, is the assessment rubric. The assessment rubric is in the module handbook, where we've got the different types of projects, the marking rubric, what constitute what grades, as well as the presentation itself, so that you know exactly what's expected of you, and you can prepare very, very early on and include the elements that markers are looking for. That rubric will be used by the markers to mark you. So you'll be looking at exactly the same thing as what the markers are looking when they're marking you, so that you know exactly what to give and provide the markers to mark you on. Any questions so far? No? Good. Right, so let's continue then. Is everyone still awake? Yeah? So good so far. Okay. I will maybe do 2 more slides, give you a bit of a break, and then come back again. Okay. Right, so how is this going to work? Because obviously you've been put into groups. So there are 2 types of meetings that you can have for supervision. One is group meetings, and the other one is individual meetings. Altogether, you should have roughly about 7 hours worth of meetings, combining both group and individual. So that's from your perspective. So imagine I'm you, one of you. So I've been allocated to the group. 4 hours of my group meetings will be spent, 4 hours of my time will be spent in group meetings. So there'll be maybe between 4 to 8 meetings, depending on how long that meeting is. And then another 3 hours where I will be spending time with my supervisor alone, asking questions. And sometimes students don't know how to use that time, which is fine because you've not done this before. What we've done is we've sort of given you some suggestions on how you can use the time. Supervisors will tend to be knowing, supervisors will know how to use it, and then there might be a preference for the supervisors on how to use those time as well. Roughly, and even though I say it's 4 group meetings, but sometimes there could be less or there could be more, depending on the project and the group itself. So about 4 group supervisory meetings where you come as a group, you support each other, you talk to each other, but also so your supervisors might ask you to write a bit of abstract and prepare for the meeting itself. So let's say, for example, you already have some meetings, and for one of the meetings, you'll be there to talk about your methods section. You may be required to write a methods section, either an abstract or the full section, and submit it to your supervisor several days or a week before the meeting itself. And then what you may ask to do, depending on supervisor, is that supervisors will read it and provide you with feedback before or during the meeting itself. And some supervisors may also require students within the group to look at each other's writing to give each other feedback. And the reason for that practice is because sometimes by looking at someone else's and commenting on other people's writing, you can also learn about what to write, because we are much better at criticizing other people's work than our own work. Okay, you can ask my wife. My wife is very good at that. She's much better at criticizing me than criticizing herself. So so using that principle of human nature, but of course in a way that helps us to learn, so that you're not there just tear people's work down, but rather to help them have the attitude of you're helping them to improve and provide the feedback that is required. And then the supervisors will also provide feedback and confirm whether the comments that you made are appropriate or not. Okay, and through that you've got multiple layers of support and feedback so that you can improve your writing. For a lot of you, because you're of your international students, some of you English may not be your first language. It may be that you've got a much steeper learning curve in getting to be comfortable with using academic language to write a research paper. And that will be something that you need to work really hard on during this period of time, just to prepare you. Okay. Usually, I mean, I've got international students all the time, and just because English isn't your first language doesn't necessarily mean that you can't do it. It's just that you have to put a little bit more work. In fact, I've got a lot of international students who have put in a lot of work and they've improved significantly over a very short period of time. I was an international student, you should see my first year, my writing on my first undergraduate year. Oh, it's horrible. I read sometimes and I keep a copy to remind myself how far I've come. And I read it and I go, oh, this is terrible, but I'm better now. Okay, not perfect, but better. Right, so remember, be part of the group, contribute to the group, turn up to the group on time, and the group meetings might occur online or it might occur in person depending on where supervisors, because some supervisors may be away or some of you might be all over the place. So be flexible in terms of how the meetings are organized and contribute to it, put some effort to it, okay? Because if you put the effort in, it's much more likely that the supervisors will then support you better and put the effort in as well. Can you imagine if you were a supervisor, you've got a group of students, you make a meeting, you ask them to submit a draft of the particular section. Only about 50% of the students submitted a draft, but you give feedback anyway. And during the meeting itself, only one person turned up. How would you feel as a supervisor? Do you think you would put in any effort to support your students? Yeah, and that's happened to me before. Obviously, I try my very best, no matter what, to support those who do turn up. But you need to engage with the supervisor in order to get them to support you. Okay, don't discourage the supervisors. The supervisors want to support you, but if you discourage them, then it's very likely the quality of support will go down. Okay. I will give you a break for 10 minutes. Come back in at about 11, and then at 11 I'll continue with the slides. Okay, I'll see you at 11 o'clock.
यहाँ पर
All right, let's make a start again. Hello, let's make a start again. So I mentioned that there should be roughly about 4 hours of group supervision, and that is 4 hours out of the 7 hours. So the rest will be what you've got left is about roughly 3 hours, and that 3 hours you can use it for individual supervision. If you feel that if the group feels that you need to have more group supervision, that's actually fine. You can actually use your individual supervision time to add on to the group supervision. So what you should have roughly about 3 hours. And during the 3 hours, you could use that time to provide feedback on the sections that you have written and that you've asked your supervisors for review. So that's when usually it's much more useful if you have already sent the draft to your supervisors, get them to comment on it, and then meet up, because then you have something to work with rather than just having a sort of a draft without any comments from the supervisors and expect the supervisor to review on the spot. That would be just a waste of time. It's much easier if you actually get the supervisor to have already provided you with feedback and then meet up to discuss how you can improve the particular draft of that particular section. Okay, one of the key things is that the discussion section is usually your own work, and you won't be supervisors won't be giving you any feedback on that. However, what you can do is, instead of giving the full discussion draft, you can summarize the key points of what you are planning to write in a discussion and pass it on to the supervisors and asking them to check the appropriateness of the content that you're going to be included, that you want to include in your discussion section. Okay, so for those of you who may feel that it may be beneficial to use that individual supervision to practice your presentation skills, especially if you haven't done that before, I would encourage you to use one of the sessions, individual sessions, to practice your presentation. That means that you need to prepare the presentation beforehand and practice on your own first, and then get your supervisors to give you some feedback on how you're presenting, and then you can then improve on either on your slides or on your presentation style. Just to say that you may or may not get your supervisors during your actual presentation to mark you. The reason for that is because I'm trying to get as many supervisors involved in the marking of the presentation as well. So I may mix and match them around so that they have got a slightly more objective sort of view on your presentations. Okay. For your meetings, I would encourage you to write down some notes so that you know exactly what feedback has been provided you. It can be in the form of a meeting form, which is included in the entry page of the GCU Learn. There is a standard format. You can use that, or you can use any format. So long as you record something and some agreed actions from each meeting, then you would have something to work with. If you're like me, who is very forgetful, I tend to write a lot of notes in order to be able to remind myself what we discussed, what are some of the key points I can improve, what are some of my strengths, and also how do I take this further on? What am I supposed to submit the next time around? What are some of the things that my supervisor requires me to do? So the sort of almost like a minutes, or rather, minutes is a bit too formal. So almost a record of what you discussed, so that it reminds you of what you're supposed to be doing. Ignore that. You already done that. The topics allocation. I was ahead of myself, so this year I've been very organized. Right. Okay. So I'm going to stop here. Any questions in regards to the supervision. Okay, no questions? Great. So I'm going to do a little bit of sort of asking you. So what I want you to do is turn to someone beside you, or if you are a bit of an introvert like me who doesn't like to talk to anybody, talk to yourself. So it's just between you and yourself, if you like to turn to someone beside you, that's absolutely fine as well. Ask each other and tell each other, what do you think will make a good supervisor? I'll give you a few minutes. Give that a shot, and then I will ask you for some ideas you have. All right, we're going to cut you short there. Sorry, that's a bit loud. Okay, so what makes a good supervisor? Anyone want to share what makes a good supervisor? Just shout out your answer. Anybody? He needs to be handsome, like me. So what makes a good supervisor? Raise your hands, and then I can call you. Supportive? Yeah. It's really important, isn't it? Someone to be supportive. You don't want someone to be there just going, just do whatever you want. Okay. Anybody else? Any other? A good listener. Good. So sometimes a supervisor needs to be a good listener not because you are trying to share your problems with the supervisor, but the supervisor needs to be able to understand where you're coming from. And obviously, a supervisor needs to be able to provide you with good advice as well. So they can't always listen to you. Otherwise, you won't get anything out of the supervisor. So it's a combination of both listening to you, what you need, but also to give you what you need by giving you the advice that you need. Any other characteristics of what makes a good supervisor? Prompt feedback. Prompt feedback. Okay, good. Yeah, that's really important, prompt feedback, because sometimes you would ask a question and if the supervisors aren't prompt in giving you the feedback, you may have forgotten what you've asked in the first place. But also it means that you're able to act on that. But saying that, a lot of supervisors will be having not just having you as their student, they are also involved in a lot of other things as well. Like for example, research, other teaching. They'll be involved, especially during the summer. There is a lot of conferences that they may be attending, presenting, and things like that. So you are one part of their entire workload. Just be prepared that if you send them a question, you give them some time to reply to you. So don't expect them to reply to you in the next 5 minutes. That would be a bit, unreasonable. So I would say between maximum of 5 days. Give them, if it's an urgent question, fair enough, within the next 1 or 2 days. If it's not a very urgent question, then give them 5 days. If usually this is the advice that I would give to students, and this has happened a lot of times, which is why I keep giving this advice, is that it isn't that supervisor doesn't want to reply you promptly, but because they've got so many other things. And sometimes they will go, yes, that student asked me a question, I'll come back to that after I completed this. But what happens is, and it's happened to me before, I go do the other things and I completely forget to come back to the original question that you are asking. Okay, it's not that we don't want to answer it, but it's just that because there are so many things that we actually forgot about your question once we do other things. So one way to manage that is after maybe about 2 or 3 days, if your supervisor hasn't answered your question yet, what you can do is send another polite email to ask. By the way, it's just to sort of, I appreciate that you're busy. I sent you a question about 3 days ago about this, and I'm just wondering if you had a chance to think about it and then provide me with some advice. So you're approaching them and you're actually doing the supervisors a favor. In fact, you're doing me a favor if you actually remind me and sending me additional email. Then I go, yeah. The student sent me an email asking this question, but I completely forgot to reply it on, when I first saw it because I got so many other things to do. And then it's much more likely that you'll come back. But be polite. Don't be demanding. Be polite but firm. Okay, so that the supervisors are much more likely to want to reply to you. This is just how you manage things. Does it make sense? Yeah. So this is how you manage supervisors. Trick. Any other characteristics or personality traits or things that makes a person a good supervisor? Yeah. So I'm just going to speak to the mic so that, because you're obviously quite far away, so it's for the recording. Be available and be flexible about availability as well. Yeah, and usually supervisors are quite flexible about availability. They do understand that for most students these days that they will have work to do, or that it may not be that sometimes certain periods of time may not be appropriate to meet up. So the different supervisors would obviously have different schedules and business and when they're available. It is always good to negotiate with the supervisor when is a good time for the next meeting. And they're really, most of the time, they're quite happy to accommodate that. Let's say, for example, for me, if I was your supervisor, and this is how I would negotiate with my students, is I would tend to ask, these are times that I was thinking of meeting. What do you think? Are you available? If none of the people are available, none of the students are available, only one of them is available. Now I usually ask, why is it you're not available? So that I can have an appreciation of why is it, then I can adjust, see how I can make accommodations to that. And for example, last week I was meeting some of my other master students in another program, and all of them are on placements. So obviously they can't meet during the day. So I was quite happy to say, from your placements, how long do you usually take to get back home and have some dinner and things like that? So in the end, we decided that we're going to meet at 8 p.m. on a Friday evening. I was quite happy to do that because I understood that they have a valid reason why they were not available, and I was quite happy to meet them in the evenings. Yeah, is that what you're trying to say? I mean, I give you evening meetings as an example, but what I would suggest that try not to encroach on your supervisor's weekends. Yeah, that is a bit much. So, but try to work around with each other between the supervisors and yourself and the group members. Okay, so if you can't meet in person as well, be flexible in terms of meeting online because these days meeting online is very, very easy. Okay, and in fact, I was working with some students. Some students prefer to meet online because it's much easier to share some of the documents online. Yeah, so it really depends. Each supervisor, each group will have slightly different preferences. Any other characteristics that makes a good supervisor? Anything else? No? Okay, so now I'm going to ask the opposite question. What makes a good dissertation student? Again, either turn to your neighbor and have a chat and share each other what makes a good dissertation student, or if you are like me, talk to yourself. I'll give a few minutes. All right. So, what do you think makes a good dissertation student, in your opinion? What do you think? You need to be buying the supervisor's presence all the time? Does it make a good? Is that what makes a good dissertation student? I mean, I don't mind. Anybody? What do you think you need to? Some of the behaviors you need to sort of have, or attitude you need to have. If you raise your hands, you can share what you. Say it again. To be punctual. Yeah, that can be it. That can be one behavior. Okay, so being punctual, and it really depends on the culture of that particular um, supervisor as well. But in this particular country, being punctual means that you value the time of the other person, and therefore you're there on time. I mean, being 1 or 2 minutes late is fine, but you know, or if you are aware, I mean, in Singapore, we tend to be punctual. I know that if I was in any Malaysians here, no, if I was in Malaysia, I was just trying not to offend anybody. If I was in Malaysia, um, a, a, a meeting time is only a guide. Okay, so you might be 10 to 20 minutes within that rough time that you've been given. But unfortunately, in the UK, that culture doesn't cut it. Okay, that is not a custom here. So don't apply that to this. So try to be on time, and because you show some respect, that means that you're respecting the other person's time. Okay, but of course, if you are in another country where the timing is only a guidance, then by all means, yeah. Any other behaviors and characteristics that you think makes a good dissertation student?
Identify weaknesses and not be afraid to clarify.
Yes. Understand your own weaknesses, the limitations that you have, and don't be afraid to ask questions and to clarify anything. Okay, it's always good to understand where you stand in terms of what skill sets you have. Acknowledging your weaknesses does not necessarily mean that you just leave it as that. By knowing where, in terms of the knowledge and competencies and behaviors that you lack, that's the first starting point of working at them in order to improve. And sometimes you can work on your own, but sometimes you need a bit of helping hand. That's when your supervisors come in, when you ask for help and ask for clarity, clarification, advice, and things like that. Supervisors can do that for you because they might be more experienced into the project, but sometimes your group members might also be able to support you in that. Okay, and you can ask for advice from your group members as well. That's another thing that you can work with. Excellent. Any other characteristics or behaviors that in your opinion, makes a good dissertation student?
Being proactive.
Being proactive. Okay. So being proactive, taking the initiative to suggest things. So let's say, for example, after a meeting, instead of waiting for the supervisors to tell you what to do, you can suggest what the next steps might be. If your supervisors feel that that may not be the appropriate step, that's absolutely fine. Then they may suggest something else to you or modify what you're suggesting. But at least you show that you are being proactive. Okay, good. Any other behaviors and characteristics that you think makes a good student? No? Right. So I'm going to just stop there for a little while. I'm just going to move on. Just to remind you that there are many, many avenues of support for you. Do not wait to the last minute to seek support. Okay? Always try your very best to identify it early. It's a bit like as health professionals, we try to prevent rather than try to intervene. So if you know early on that there are certain things that you need to work on, ask for advice, or go actively seek help. There are different avenues. There is your supervision group who may know things or areas of support where you might not, and you can ask them. There's a supervisor where you can ask for help. If the supervisors don't have the skill sets to help you, they might point you in the right direction as to where to seek help. There is me. I'm here to advise you on anything to do with the module itself. Okay, so anything to do with module but not related to a topic, I'm here to help. There is a library staff, and you'll meet the library staff tomorrow, and that's where they are able to help you as well. So, but be respectful of the time. There's a lot of you, and there's only a few of them. So think about what's the best way to get the help. If there are sessions planned, because library and the Learning and Development Center has got classes or sessions planned. If you go and have a look to see what classes there are, sign up for those classes, and then turn up for the classes. Okay, especially if you sign them up, do turn up. One of the key things that the staff in the library and the LDC always tells me is that students, it's not just you, the entire university, is that students sign up and then they don't turn up for the classes. Okay, so that's quite discouraging. Okay, so just make sure that you do turn up if you sign up for the classes. If you are collecting data from the lab, or if you need any equipment, then the lab technicians are the people that you need to contact. Okay, so but for most of you, you probably don't need that. This is my email, and okay, so and if you need anything in regards to the module, you can just email me. It should also be in the email that I'll be sending to you this week, allocating you your groups and your supervisors. Okay, so you have got a copy of that. So just keep in mind. I may or may not create a team site for you so that you can actually ask me questions and drop your questions there. Depends on whether that's appropriate or not. But if I do create a team site, then it becomes a source, a channel where you can sort of just drop a question there. And it also means that anybody else who have got similar questions don't have to repeat the question again. And when I provide the answer, everybody knows exactly what my response is. Good. Now, for this entire module, there will be some sessions. There will be one session where I've actually created that's called a Dissertation Cafe, where I get all of you to come back here. The reason why I've done that is so that I can check mid-module to make sure that you're okay, and whether you have any questions that you need to ask. In that session, I will encourage all of you to attend. The reason for that is because you can then ask questions very specific to your project, and I'll try my very best to answer them. Okay? So I may not be able to answer directly about your project, but I will be able to advise you in general using the principles I've seen in other projects that people have done. Or if you're facing some issues with regards to the project itself, or with the module, or interaction, then that's the place to ask me the questions as well. And then I can try to advise you on what to do next. Okay, so it's, even if you don't have any questions, if you do turn up, at least if you listen to what other people are asking, if that particular issue happens to you at a later stage, at least you know what potentially some solutions are. Okay, or you may turn up and then suddenly you realize that, oh, actually, I have another question that's related to that. Then you can start asking your questions. The Dissertation Cafes, previously students have not been attending. I don't require them to attend, but I think it's great for you to attend. And those students who have attended tend to find that extremely useful. Okay. And for those who haven't attended, I realize that they tend to come back to me asking the same questions again. So it may be worth, I would strongly encourage you to turn up for the Dissertation Cafe so that you benefit from it. Okay. It allows also you to discuss your ideas here with me. where I can give you a perspective, because I've done so many projects and I've overlooked the entire module for some years. So I may be able to provide you with some advice on your ideas as well, or what you're trying to ask me. So I would encourage you to attend the dissertation cafes. Okay, there you go. That's exactly it. I mean, if you want to bring coffee along and tea along, that's absolutely fine. We just ignore that sign that says no drinks in the room. But you know, it's supposed to be an informal space where we can actually have a chat between you and me. Okay. Now, something else. I won't go very deep into this because there are some materials within the module site itself. I prepared some materials for you in the in the GCU Learn, where you can go in and learn and sort of update yourself about certain topics. So I would encourage you to go in and have a look. Okay, so I've put in some nice resources for the different types of projects, as well as some of the key things that you need to actually think about. And I also have previous recordings of prepared recordings of the same slides for the research question. So if you want slightly more in-depth or a starting point, then go back to these videos, go to the GCU Learn site and just browse around. You might find little gems here and there that will help you, that might be useful. So what makes a good research question? This is what's quite standard now, where we encourage students to think about by using the PICO or the PAO framework. You might already have seen that in your advanced research methods module. So PICO stands for population, intervention, comparator, and outcome measure. This is usually for quantitative studies or for randomized controlled trials or interventional studies. However, if it's not a randomized controlled trial, much more observational or much more of a qualitative study, then we tend to use the PAO framework, which is the PEO, which is population, exposure, or environment, and O is the outcome. Okay, so use this framework when you're chatting with your supervisors to narrow down the research question that you're supposed to do. What I found is that through observing the progression, the timing of the progression of students during their supervision, is that students tend to overestimate the amount of time they put it into coming up with a research question. Usually I would give maybe about 1 to 2 weeks to come up, maximum 2 weeks, to come up with a research question. And you have to confirm that research question by the end of the second week. However, a lot of students drag on to the third and fourth week, and what that happens, if that happens, you're eating into the time of you actually doing the data collection or the review itself. So I would suggest that you work really hard in your first and second week to clarify and confirm and lock down your research question, so that you can spend the rest of the time doing the main bulk of the work. Okay, and it's really, really important to get your research question right, because if you get it, if it's not quite right, then what will happen is that your project might be a bit much more ambiguous, or it might be harder to actually do your project. Okay. After you come up with your ideas and your research question, then what you need to do is to go away and find the preliminary literature. So we have organized tomorrow, how do you search databases with the librarian using keywords, so that you can actually give a practice. And I would recommend that you start to look at literature surrounding your topic, so that you get an idea of what's going on. And that's really, really important. Based on experience of what students have done, one of the key things that students tend not to do, or rather are not very good at doing, is to identify a knowledge gap that they need to, within a topic, in order to be able to do the research, ask the research question, and do the review, or do the research project. What is a knowledge gap? A knowledge gap is something that within the topic itself, past researchers or people within the field would have done different types of work. But as you know, because of the constraint of resources, for example, time, money, as well as the type of setting and the access to different types of patients or populations, they may not always have the perfect project type. So for example, they may not be able to have a control group, they may not have a longer time to follow up, or there are certain things that they are unable to do because it is sometimes very, very resource intensive. If you were to look through the literature, one of the key things that you need to find, you need to pick up is what is it that they haven't been able to do by past researchers, and that's your knowledge gap. Sometimes the knowledge gap is quite hard to find because you think that they've already done everything that you can. But knowledge gaps isn't just about what people haven't done, but it can also be about what could have they done better. One very simple example is that timing in terms of the follow-ups. So for a lot of intervention studies, they may do a before and after. They may do a follow-up maybe about 2 weeks or about a month later. But for certain conditions and for certain treatment, what you are really looking for isn't just the immediate improvement. What you're looking for is a much more longer improvement, as well as the carry-on improvements and effect on the people who have been treated using that particular intervention. So what you're really interested in is also 3 months follow-up, 6 months follow-up, 12 months follow-up. If most studies haven't done that, then the literature isn't able to then tell you what the carryover effects or the longer term effects of that particular treatment is. And if you identify that, that is a knowledge gap or something similar along those lines. I'm just giving you an example. Okay, so look at not just about the knowledge, but also about the mechanics of how the trials have been done, how the research has been done, because sometimes the hint can be in what could they have done better. Another way to find knowledge gaps is simply read the articles, because the authors themselves, for the more honest and better authors, they will be able to tell you what knowledge gap is there. And that is a godsend, because if they stated what the knowledge gap is, you can use that. Check if some other people have tried or at least attempt to answer the knowledge gap, and then you can actually borrow that and then use that as your knowledge gap as well. Okay, so there are different ways of looking at what knowledge gap is. At the end of the day, your dissertation should have a application and have a impact on practice. So which means that towards the end of your paper that you write, you should always have a section that talks about implications of your review, what it means for practice, what it means for research, what is it that you haven't really looked at, and then from there you can then go on one step further and make recommendations of what should be done next, both for practice but also for research as well. And it's very important. By having those sections and having discussions about those implications, applications, as well as impact and recommendations, it will bring your dissertation in terms of the quality one step higher. Okay, that's something that you have to think very hard about. So just to remind you to contact your supervisors for our first meeting as a group. And I will encourage you very strongly to attend the Dissertation Cafe. Okay, I'll be here, I'll be leading the Dissertation Cafe. So you have me. And if you like me to lead a session, then please do turn up, even if it's just to see my face. Okay, you're paid to come to the program, you might as well look at my face. And if you like, you can set up communication groups to support each other, or you can ask your supervisors to create such communication groups. This year, I'm not leading a research project group, but in past years when I did, I tend to set up a Teams site or a Teams channel for just that small group where I use it to students can dump their drafts there, and I can just simply give feedback, and everybody can see the feedback that I give for each other's drafts. But also because it functions like chat as well, so you can just post your messages there, and I can answer very, very quickly. Okay. So if you feel that that's useful, or if you feel that WhatsApp is something that you're much more comfortable with, then you yourself as a student group can set up the WhatsApp. But don't expect your supervisors to join the WhatsApp, because sometimes they might not have a WhatsApp. Okay, so it just depends. Okay, so great. Any questions to ask me? This is the end of my session. Just to tell you, and you've got another class this afternoon. So have a good lunch, have a nap, and then come back so that you don't fall asleep. Any questions for me before you go? Doesn't look like it. So thank you very much, and I'll see you guys around.